In the reading from John's Gospel for this fourth Sunday of Easter, we encounter people engaging and meeting Jesus in the temple, asking a great question, a zinger, if you will. They ask, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly." As I consider this question in the Gospel this week, I have two reactions. The first is to say, why would we raise such a question this soon after Easter? After all, we have just celebrated the plainest, most irrefutable proof of Jesus' Messiahship, the resurrection itself, right? On the other hand, the question in the lectionary seems to feel spot on. It tells us the truth about how faith works. It tells us how we really need to be honest about the questions that we feel in our own hearts and lives. Most of the time, faith isn't a clear ascent from confusion to clarity, from doubt to belief and trust. It's a perpetual turning, if you will, a circle we trace from knowing to unknowing, from unbelief to doubt and further belief, from the risen Christ to, "If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly." I used to consider such circling a kind of weakness, if you will, but I don't anymore. It's how human beings work. It's how real life is experienced by all of us. So if you find yourself asking if Jesus could speak more plainly into the circumstances of life, you're not alone. If something in you feels suspended and impatient, questioning and doubtful, welcome to the way of authentic faith. I don't know about you, but for me, the question Jesus confronts in the temple hits a nerve. It exposes some real pain and yearning. Some days I feel as if God is keeping us in suspense. Many times throughout the years, I've found my own prayers beginning with the words that if you are, for instance, if you are good, if you are powerful, if you are loving, if you're real, if you are the Messiah, then stop with the riddles. Stop hiding. Show me your real presence. Make it clear. How does Jesus respond? Well, not plainly. "I have told you," he says, "but you do not believe." And then the icy clincher, "You do not believe because you do not belong to my sheep." Ouch. I've spent several days wrestling with that particular sentence. You do not believe because you do not belong to my sheep. What can such a stark pronouncement mean? I suppose the easy dodge would be to assume that the sentence doesn't apply to me. After all, I'm a cradle believer. I grew up in the church. I know the Bible. I love the liturgy. I say my prayers. Surely I both believe and belong. Except when I don't. The nagging trouble with Jesus' indictment is that it does apply to my spiritual experience, and not only at rare moments. When I ask Jesus to stop keeping me in suspense, when I insist that he speak plainly, what am I really saying? I'm suggesting I really can't trust. I just can't go quite that far. I'm not sure that I will hear the voice or recognize it if I do. You, dear Lord, are supposed to be the good shepherd. I'm supposed to know your voice, but I very often don't. So what now? At first glance, Jesus' reply might appear to suggest that belonging in him and to him depends upon believing in him first. But in fact, what Jesus says is exactly the opposite. The struggle is that we need to first belong. There lies the real possibility. In other words, belief doesn't come first, belonging does. Our hope and consolation can be found there. According to this text, whatever belief I arrive at in this life will not come from the ups and downs of my own emotional life. It will not come from a creed, from a doctrine, or a cleverly worded sermon. Rather, it comes from the daily, hourly business of belonging to the flock of Jesus. of walking in the footsteps of the shepherd, living in the company of the fellow sheep and listening in real time for the voice of the one whose classroom is rocky hills, hidden pastures, and deeply shadowed valleys. If I won't follow him into those layered places, places of both tranquility and treachery, trust and doubt, I will never belong to him at all. Maybe by refusing to speak plainly, Jesus was honoring the human life with its incredibly complicated realities. Jesus came to teach us about truth, love, life in its fullness, and eternal life. One doesn't simply profess belief in such weighty and mysterious things. One lives into them, questions them, grows into them, wrestles with them, and in the wrestling belongs. Living as we do on this side of the resurrection, we know that even the first eyewitnesses to the empty tomb struggled with believing. Why should we be superior? We are wondering and wandering creatures, a species that's prone to stumble all over ourselves. We are sheep, and our only hope is in the goodness of our ever-loving shepherd. I suspect that Jesus' answer was not what the people in the temple that day wanted to hear. They wanted a version of proof that would not require them to step into the smelly sheep pen and muck around with the other sheep. They wanted certainty without risk, truth without trust, a Messiah who would provide for them, but not provoke. That kind of plain telling, Jesus said, is not available. The only knowing on offer is an incarnational knowing. Jesus requires us to believe through the interest that we get in sharing life together. To believe in the gospel sense means to trust, to lean into, to depend on, to throw my lot in with. It's an orientation of the heart, a willingness to stake everything I've got on the person, the character, the life, death, and resurrection of God's Son. It's learned through relationship. Sheep know their shepherd because they are his. They walk, graze, feed, and sleep in his shadow, beneath his rod and staff, within constant earshot of his voice. They believe because they have surrendered to his care, his authority, his leadership, his guidance, his love. Christianity is not a spectator sport. Belong, Jesus says. Consent to belong. Belief will follow.